In 1998, in a subdivision called Camelot, in maybe the safest part of Huntsville, Alabama, a 17-year-old boy from an aerospace family came home from school and quietly gathered a sledgehammer, a hatchet, a butcher knife, and another tool that nobody could explain. By the time the streetlights came on, 2 of his family members were dead. 3 more were fighting for their lives, and the neighborhood that thought it had escaped the rest of America was about to learn it had not. If you've never been to Huntsville, Alabama, here's the deal. They call it the Rocket City, and the nickname is earned. NASA set up shop in North Alabama after World War II, and the whole region rearranged itself around aerospace and defense. By the late 90s, Huntsville was full of engineers and scientists raising kids in clean little subdivisions with hopeful names. The one at the center of this story was called Camelot. That was the actual name on the street sign, which in retrospect feels like a novelist trying way too hard, except it was just the real neighborhood. South Huntsville in 1998 was a place where lawns stayed well manicured and people left bicycles on front lawns without worrying about them getting stolen. The local industry was space and defense and cotton, roughly in that order. The Franklins lived at 1305 Camelot Drive. Dad was Gerald, an engineer at a tech firm called VMIC. Mom was Cynthia. They had 5 kids together. Jeffrey was the oldest at 17. Then 14-year-old Sarah and Stacy, then 8-year-old Timothy, and the baby was Christopher, who was 6. To the neighbors, the Franklins looked exactly like the family the whole subdivision had been built for. Inside the house, things were a lot more complicated, and most of the complication had to do with Jeffrey. Jeffrey had been diagnosed with ADHD, which isn't unusual, but he also had major depressive disorder, and his doctors had him on a daily combination of Prozac and Ritalin. Before anybody comes after me, I'm not anti-medication, not even remotely. I'm telling you what was happening in 1998. Pediatric psychiatry in the late 90s was its own little Wild West. Long-term safety data on SSRIs in a developing teenage brain was thin, and data on stacking SSRIs with stimulants in teenagers was even thinner. The Franklins trusted their doctors, and most parents in 1998 did the same. That afternoon, Jeffrey walked through his own house, gathering an arsenal. He grabbed a 2-pound sledgehammer from the garage, a hatchet, a butcher knife from the kitchen, and also a rat tail file, which is a long, tapered metal tool that mechanics use for shaping holes in metal. That last item is kind of one that haunts the forensic psychologists. It's not a tool that you grab to do anything rational with. It has a specific need, and it's definitely not what Jeffrey used it for. According to retired Huntsville Police investigator Mac McCutcheon, who handled the case at the time and later became an Alabama state representative, Cynthia Franklin was killed first. Jeffrey stabbed his mother with the rat tail file. He then attacked 14-year-old Sarah, slashing her neck. His father, Gerald, arrived home, and Jeffrey bludgeoned him to death with that 2-pound sledgehammer. He then went after his 2 youngest brothers, 8-year-old Timothy and 6-year-old Christopher, with the hatchet. By every medical expectation, Sarah, Timothy, and Christopher should not have survived. By something close to a miracle, all 3 did. Their sister Stacy was not physically harmed. By the end of the afternoon, the Franklin family had gone from 7 people to 4 traumatized children, no parents, and a teenager fleeing the scene in his parents' car. A neighbor saw Jeffrey leave the house covered in blood and called the police. Another neighbor spotted one of the children outside in a puddle of blood and also dialed 911, thinking they were calling about one injured child. The first responders had no idea what they were walking into. By the time the officers got there, Jeffrey was already gone. The chase started down at Ditto Landing on the Tennessee River and ended in a yard not far from the Franklin home. Officers finally got him into handcuffs. He was shirtless and spitting and cursing and making obscene gestures at officers and news crews. Carved into his chest was the outline of an upside-down cross. He'd done that to himself. And a quick second on the survivors, because most people telling this story, they focus on the rockets and then straight to Jeffrey and the legal circus and The kids almost vanished from this. Sarah, Timothy, and Christopher are alive today because of an extraordinary medical response that afternoon. They spent years afterward in surgeries and therapy and rehabilitation. Whatever those four did with their lives later, they did it without the spotlight, because the spotlight stayed on their brother. After the arrest, investigators went through Jeffrey's bedroom and found the journals, the drawings, and the satanic writings. They brought in a now retired Huntsville detective named Jeff Bennett, who was the department's longtime expert on cults and occultism, and who was also an active Baptist pastor at a church in Tennessee. Bennett interpreted Jeffrey's writings as evidence of real occult involvement, and he told a local news investigation years later that Jeffrey had intended to ritually sacrifice members of his own family. To a religious Southern community in 1998, this was the cleanest possible story. The Satanic Panic of the 80s was still alive and well in Middle America and the South, and people wanted to believe that violence like this came from outside the family. Most modern forensic psychologists read the case differently. They see a very sick 17-year-old who had not slept in days, who was already in a deep psychotic spiral. The satanic content was the language his disintegrating brain reached for when nothing else really made sense. The breakdown came first, and the imagery came after. And then there's the medication question, which has never really gone away. Treatment activation syndrome is a condition where certain medications, especially SSRIs, paired with stimulants, can push patients into manic agitation and a break from reality. The late 90s produced a string of devastating juvenile crimes that all had one strange thing in common. Kip Kinkle in Oregon, on Prozac and Ritalin, killed his parents and opened fire at his school. Luke Woodham in Mississippi, on Prozac, killed his mother and opened fire at his school. Whether medication played a role on March 10th for Jeffrey Franklin has never been fully resolved. By 1999, Alabama had ruled Jeffrey mentally incompetent to stand trial. He was sent to a secure psychiatric hospital where clinicians spent over a year stabilizing him until he could understand the charges. The case went back to court in Madison County in late 2000. Prosecutors announced they were going after the death penalty. Jeffrey had been 17 at the time of the murders, and Alabama law in 1998 allowed execution for crimes committed as a minor. That decision turned the case into an international story, and Amnesty International launched a global campaign focused specifically on that case. Jury selection started October 2nd, 2000. 3 days in, the judge declared a mistrial because several prospective jurors had been openly talking about the case during selection. Faced with a change of venue, both sides settled. In 2001, Jeffrey Franklin pled guilty to 2 counts of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. The state dropped the death penalty, and he was sentenced to 5 consecutive life prison terms. 4 years later, in 2005, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Roper v. Simmons that executing people for crimes they committed under the age of 18 violated the 8th Amendment. The court cited international human rights pressure as evidence of evolving standards of decency, and the amnesty campaign around Jeffrey Franklin was part of that pressure. Jeffrey Franklin is being held today at Bullock Correctional Facility near Union Springs, Alabama. He came up for parole in 2016, and the board denied him. He came up again in August 2022, and Madison County DA Robert Broussard drove down to Montgomery personally to argue against his release. Victim advocates filled the room. The board voted unanimously to deny parole and gave him the maximum 5-year reset. His next hearing is in August of 2027. The Camelot subdivision is still there, and the house at 1305 Camelot Drive is still standing. The 4 kids who lived through that afternoon grew up and built private lives that they have every right to keep private. Their parents are still gone, and their brother is still in prison. People want stories like this to have a clean explanation, and the satanic theory of 1998 was certainly clean. The medication theory and the mental illness theory are far messier, and the honest answer is probably that all 3 were tangled together inside the sick head of a 17-year-old on a quiet street in Huntsville, Alabama. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder, bingeable true crime stories. Hello, I'm Joe. I am the host. And here's an email. Subject, my brother finally listened. Hi, Joe. I've been telling my brother to check out your show for at least a year. During our recent drive from Denver to Moab, he finally gave in. Now he's asking me which episodes he should go back and listen to after we got home. I feel slightly vindicated. Thank you for giving me an easy recommendation. Lauren in Lakewood, Colorado. And Lauren, first of all, thank you for being a loyal listener. Thank you for sharing the podcast with your brother. And here's the thing. I'm a brother. I've got 2 sisters, and my older sister, she's told me things throughout my life that I've now later in my adulthood have realized, she was right. Older sisters are usually right about things, and I hope she never ever hears me say those words, because she'll never let me forget that I said that. She'll probably make what I just said her ringtone or something like that. But my point is, older siblings, especially older sisters, usually have your best interests at heart, and they know you just as well, if not better than you know yourself. So your brother should have known better, is what I'm saying. But I'm glad to have him on board now. Hey, if you're a brand new listener, like Lauren's brother, make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Also, go to 10minutemurder.com. There you can contact me. You can also get listen links. You can also get links to where you can find the show on social media. And if this podcast you think, well, 10 minutes is cool, but I really wish I had longer episodes to listen to, you can check out my other podcast. It's called True Crime Blueprint. It's available in most places. This one is available. True Crime Blueprint. The episodes are longer, more of a deep dive into true crime cases. And that's going to do it. That's your episode for today. Thank you for listening to 10 Minute Murder. See you next time.